When I was studying at UCLA, I had many life options because I was studying political science and international relations, and I was studying Mandarin and Spanish at the same time. I was thinking about becoming a foreign service officer. That also gave me options to explore joining the US ROTC or come back to Korea and do my military service, even though I didn't have to, simply because I thought as a person of Korean heritage and a male gender, I should, I should do all that kind of stuff. So I was pondering all those ideas, but journalism was so much fun, and I was good at it, and I was being rewarded well, and people liked what I was doing. So it became a career by 1987. And when I wanted to visit communist China, they say, "Oh, you can't come here. You have Korean citizenship." So that's when I switched over to US citizenship so that I can go visit Mount Baekdu, which is part of Korean national anthem, something that we've learned about all our lives growing up here through elementary school. But I have never met anybody who visited Mount Baekdu. So I wanted to go look at it myself, confirm it. So that's what I did back in 1988. What upsetted me most about visiting Mount Baekdu was all the trash people had left behind in the mountains on the PRC side. So, there's no citizenship there. People were eating stuff in the train and throwing stuff out the window. And I thought, yeah, this is not cool. What I learned in 1997 was that the people were dying of starvation in North Korea. I was looking for ways to cover this story. I have many sources in Koreatown, and one of them was a Christian newspaper publisher who told me, "Oh, by the way, between Protestants, Catholics, and Buddhists, we are gathering donations to send food to North Korea." They say, well, it'll be cheapest to purchase the food in PRC and then ship it across to North Korea. Okay, well, is anybody going to be witnessing that, to confirm that the donation is being properly used? They say, yes, we're thinking about sending a delegation. So I joined a group of Catholic priests, a Protestant person, and a Buddhist monk. And we went to Dandong in People's Republic of China, where we witnessed 1,000 tons of corn being loaded onto a train. And I noticed these Chinese workers using spikes to pick up the bags, one bag at a time, corn, to throw them over to the train. And in that process, the spike causes a little bit of tear in the bags, and there was a huge pile of corn on the ground over the stone pebbles at the railroad track. And when they were finished loading 1,000 tons of corn, they brought some empty bags and put all those corns on the ground into them, and then tie it and then throw it over to the top of the pile into the train, and then shut the train door. And then we got in the train and came to Beijing, took a Korea flight from Beijing to Pyongyang. So when the train arrived in Pyongyang, I went there to watch them, to document them unloading the bags. And lo and behold, one of the North Korean officials came very, very upset and say, "Who do you think you are? You think we're animals to bring us food with pebbles in them?" So I said, wait a minute. I was there. I watched them. They were shoveling all of what was on the ground into that bag, and they threw it up there. You should check the other bags. When they checked the other bags, they were clean.
Mm.
So it got rid of a possible disaster that was happening by me witnessing that from Dandong and then confirming it in Pyongyang. So paying attention is our job. That's what journalists do. Pay attention to details, pay attention to hypocrisies, pay attention to wrongdoings. I volunteer for that assignment. Nobody else have the linguistical or cultural knowledge to cover that story. So when I came out of North Korea, I went to Japan, Tokyo, and joined Karen Watanabe, who was our Tokyo bureau chief. And I spent a couple of days with her, and we wrote the story, and we filed with my pictures from there. So, in journalism, if you don't raise your hand, editors, they're too busy to recognize who is capable of what. So being assertive in newsrooms and just always speaking up for what is right and how you can contribute to the story, that's important as a journalist.
You mentioned about going to Pyongyang and
Yeah.
China, and you even changed your nationality for it. So I actually want to share this photo, which is very unusual. It's not easy to go to Pyongyang as a reporter to begin
Uh-huh.
with.
Yeah.
And B, it's not easy to make North Koreans smile that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the secret behind it? How did you do
Well,
it?
first of all, I have a personality. I can be friends with anybody, anywhere. For a North Korean soldier on duty to be able to talk to this stranger who speaks Joseonmal as far as they're concerned, and to be able to communicate, I made him defenseless, basically, just with my own charm of being there, talking to him, and I can mimic North Korean dialect. When they say things like um, 어디 가서 살든지 조선 사람으로서 긍지를 잊지 말라우. It's like, don't forget your Korean no matter where you live. Stuff like that. I could mimic that, and it'll make them laugh, because when we show up with a camera, as soon as they see a camera or people see a camera, their natural expressions go away. So by engaging with people, sometimes they forget, oh, this guy has a camera. And then I could get more natural look, a natural situation that I can document. So it's part of the trade secret to be able to let people bring their guard down, wherever I go.
I'm glad that you raised the point about the language skills, because that was actually my next question. You spent a lot of time in the States, you grew up there, but still you did not forget the Korean language. What was your secret to make sure that you don't forget the Korean language while you were living in the States? Was it because you're living in LA, or?
First of all, I did not make conscientious effort to keep my Korean language. But what I did was I did Korean reading time to time. And even though my working language, 95, 99% of the language is in English, because I read Korean news articles, books time to time to keep up with the knowledge about Korea and Korean culture and to study Korean history, it helped me maintain some ability to keep up with the vocabulary and terms.
When you were dreaming to become a foreign service officer, did you think that you had a talent in photography?
I actually did not think about that kind of things, because I was just having so much fun being able to go to all the UCLA sporting events for free and to be able to document it and have fun taking pictures. Learning to take pictures of balls moving with manual focus lenses. Those are, insurmountable challenges for anybody to learn. And I was just so into that stuff that I didn't think about anything else. But because I was just keep rewarded for what I was capable of, and people at the LA Times, when I first got there, the older photographers would keep telling me, slow down, you're making us look bad. You know, when I was hearing that, deep down, I'm thinking, I guess I'm doing something right. That's in the US, Los Angeles, Korean American men protecting Korean American shops and people and children. And at the time, it was just happening and I was documenting it, right? But in hindsight, what that did was it changed the Western civilization's perspective and stereotype about Asian men. If you look at all the movies and dramas and Broadway play, Asian men who were never portrayed honorably or with masculinity. But suddenly in 1992, in a real situation, I was able to document Korean men with holding guns, being in a defensive position, protecting people's lives and property. So, things have changed, and this is a product of what photojournalism can do, because we tell life what it is. Mainstream media doesn't always reflect life as it is. They reflect the perspective of perhaps the decision makers, who doesn't necessarily reflect the general population. But by sheer coincidence of me covering LA riots, showing those masculine Korean males, I think it contributed to people's more balanced perspective about what Asian males are. Historians can have different perspectives. That's why we have theories in academia that changes whenever better theories come up. Well, photojournalism, as the first draft of history, we just document, what it is for what it is. And based on that, people can have academic discussions and political, judgments, but facts don't change. And that's what drives us to document the facts. Growing up in the US as a Korean American, I've always felt this ignorance in English language about history and culture of Korea contributes to their lack of respect or absence of acknowledgement of this ancient civilization in the East. As a American educated journalist, I have a responsibility to at least contribute to this knowledge base in the English language about my own heritage and identity, for sake of everybody, not just for Korean Americans or Korean adoptees, but everybody who has any interest in broadening their knowledge and balance the view about the world. More than half of the world's population is Asian. They better learn to respect Asians, perhaps, for what they are. And nothing is more truthful than showing in the pictures, which is the universal language of 21st century. Everybody understands what photography is, even if they cannot understand languages. Growing up in the US as a teenager from 13 on, teenagers can be very mean to each other. What I experienced firsthand was that kids don't know what they're doing, and they will say things that they learn perhaps from adults in their lives. That's just how it is. And I was always prepared to defend myself physically and verbally and mentally, and that's the reality that the teenagers had to grow up with. And what I found out as I was going through teenage years in Los Angeles is that if I can beat them in their own arguments in English, then I can shut them up. So, I did that by not only study English, but study Spanish in English and Mandarin in English. But with my language skills, I was able to control most of the unpleasantries that I dealt with through university. And once I go to places as Los Angeles Times representative, and people say, "Oh, where are you from?" After they find out my name is Hyungwon, they say, "Oh, where are you from? Are you Korean?" I say, "I'm Korean." and then they say, "Oh, 안녕하세요." Whatever Korean they know, they try to be courteous. But when they start turning nasty and say condescending comments like, "Oh, you speak pretty good English," then I turn right back at and tell them, "You too," you know. And having that attitude of "don't mess with me" attitude, it helped me do my job as a journalist and to keep my presence intact wherever I go, where I'm not being bullied by anybody. So that's the attitude of a Korean American male that I projected and that I lived. And I found that to be working for me. I rather dealt with them and make sure that they don't do that to other Asian males that they run into. And for the same reason, wherever I go, people say, "Oh, don't you have a Korean name? Don't you have American name?" I say, "No, my Korean name's fine. Get used to it." Having that confidence in my own identity, helped me be who I am, because I lived through experiencing and practicing having clear and definitive self-identity about who I am. I wanted my boys who were born in the States to have access to that self-identity. I always felt that I gotta show to my kids in my own life how a Korean American male should behave, what kind of attitude we should have. At the same time, I wanted them to have substantive knowledge about Korean heritage. So that's what motivated me to use my journalism skills to tell stories about Korean culture and history in third person's eyes, objective view about Korea in the 21st century. And that's how I began my Visual History of Korea project in 2020. Even LA riots, none of my staff at LA Times really had as much appreciation or in-depth knowledge about Korean American community. And that was fine. They have their own lives, they have their own sets of upbringings. That's why American newsrooms have to be more diverse so that their crew, their team of reporters can go anywhere, cover any stories. Well, mainstream media was not so great at hiring so many minorities. But at least they had me, one person who understood what was going on in Korean American community. And I did my best documenting that. And it was just a nonchalant, assignment for me to just truthfully and accurately document what was happening without police being present, Korean men coming out, doing what they can to protect family and property. And I was just doing my job. Luckily, I was part of an organization that recognized my work, and they submitted my work to the Pulitzer Prize, and we were able to be recognized for that. But the greater recognition was our in-house editorial photographer of the year award that I received at the LA Times. Out of 1,100 plus editorial employees, that they recognized me at the end of 1992. That, to me, the recognition by my peers was more was more dear to me. And I think people after 92 they respected perhaps my presence in the newsroom more, because I showed in my actions what I can do. Whereas, every newsroom has their own favorite people who work with the editors, and a lot of times those favorite reporters and photographers get the best assignments. Well, if I was not on the A team back then, I made that A team later. And that's part of the competition in journalism, which makes American journalism great. My personal favorite picture is, of course, picture of my son, my Louis, my son, second son, Louis. When he was 5, he was inspired to be a soccer player, because he, for the first time, watched Korean men on TV beating other people. And it just gave him so much inspiration to become a soccer player. And then he later became a professional soccer player for youth group at age 14. But when he was just 6 years old, one day I was watching his game and I was taking pictures. He made this game-winning goal. And to me, it's a picture that is such a storytelling picture of this little Korean kid beating the whole team, scoring the game-winning goal, and just showing this exuberation. That has always been my favorite picture. I'm a science guy. I started my education at UCLA with physics, but before that it was biology. And of course, my interest in anthropology, it gives me this idea that wherever people live, they have their own native animals. Okay, so if you study the native animals around the people, you study that native culture. And when I came to Korea, or when I was researching about Korean dogs, I couldn't believe how they've been part of Korean culture so long. It's documented in paintings and in writings. And then with the advent of science and genome sequencing, now they can study genome sequence of a particular breed and tell how ancient the breed is. It turns out the Korean dogs are one of the ancient dogs of 10,000 years ago. It's one of the handful of ancient dogs found with bones of ancient people. So, even though written history are burned every time there's regime change and whatever, that kind of biological details, it speaks volume about the ancient nature of this culture. That's how I approached documenting about Korean dogs. And then it turns out horses probably are the second most popular breed of domesticated animals because they're so resourceful. And Jeju horses, first of all, they're so cute. They're tiny compared to American quarter horses. They're tiny, they're cute, and when you get to know them, when you meet them, they act like puppies. They're curious, and they show genuine interest in this new visitor. And I found that experience to be just very pleasant. So and more I studied about the horses, more fascinating facts came out. For example, there's an area in Seogwipo, which is southern half of Jeju Island. There's an area where they discover human and horse footprints on fossils. And when I talk to the volcanists who study volcanoes in Jeju Island, they say, oh, those fossil footprints are at least 3,600 years to 4,000 years old, because that's when they had volcanic activity that covered those grounds that turned them into fossils. Well, that's archaeological and scientific, evidence about ancient history of Korean people that the books don't talk about because they did not document those details. But now, using modern, concepts and knowledge, we can refer back to history with those information. And then the most fascinating find I made was that one of the researchers who were present when Western experts came to inspect these footprints, because this is like one of the rarest find in anywhere where human footprints were found with animal footprints in fossils. One of the Western experts apparently told the Jeju horse expert that there's a set of elephant footprints along with these horse footprints. Okay? And then to me, that sparked a curiosity. How could elephant have been here? Because no known modern history books or knowledge associates elephant with Korean culture. But then when I was when I went to Puyo Museum, they had the original Baekje incense burner, which had elephant with a person riding on it. And then it to me, that connected the dots. The ancient history about presence of elephants were passed down to people in Baekje who carved that into the incense burner, you know. So the proximity, less than a day's travel from where the incense burner was found to where the footprints of elephants are, it just completes the whole circle, and that's what journalism do. We are storytellers. We tell stories about what we find and what we discover, and how photojournalists visually connect the dots. And to me, if you talk about history with those storytelling skills, is far more interesting and memorable than remembering the years and the dates and the names of the people. And that's the approach of the visual history of Korea, column that I've been writing, and the book that was published by the Random House. First of all, it's never been so cool to be a Korean. Having confidence in their own ability and their potential to do whatever they want to do, they have all the necessary foundations that us generations have already paved. To have that acknowledgement, to have that understanding, to have that sense of self-worth, self-reliance, and self-confidence, it takes unshakable belief in your own identity. And I can tell you, based on my research, that the Korean ancestors have done it all in the past. From the Bronze Age on, in every stage of major technological innovations, they paved the way to be the top-notch performers. They should be proud of that. And they should confirm that they have that potential to do the same in this 21st century, no matter which way the life takes them. So having unshakable self-confidence in your own self and about their own heritage. Who are you? Whenever people ask you, and say, I'm Korean and I'm proud of it, and that gives foundation to do anything else, in my opinion.
Last question. What are you working on right now?
I'm going to Jeju Island tomorrow morning. I'm going to document the first full moon celebration with local shamans, because shamanism, which is basis for Korean spirituality, has always been the source of go-to wisdom for Korean women and people in the past. And it's just such a integral part of Korean culture, and it's going away because of the religion and philosophy, and of course, psychological counseling that takes place now. Long term, I like to extend footprints of ancient Koreans beyond Korea. There's plenty of footprints in the Northeast PRC now, and in Okinawa, and in Kyushu Island. There's so many. And then, of course, in Los Angeles, where first Korean American community was formed. So I like to document the Koreans in Cuba, Koreans in Yucatan Peninsula, Koreans in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Just tie all these loose concepts into one whole, about 80 million Koreans all around the world, how we are living in the first 21st century. History right now is being nationalized too much, especially ancient history with different interpretations. By documenting with facts and history and truthful moments, hopefully future generations will have a common knowledge about the history of East Asia from 21st century, and that'll bring more peace and prosperity and cooperation amongst Asian cultures in the future.
Is it your personal project or are you collaborating with any organizations on it?
It's my personal project because I want to be free from any funding sources or influenced by others. I like to keep this objective so that whatever I do remains as an objective facts and information for future generations to consider as noteworthy. Just go to my last name, kang.org, and it'll have links to my blogs and columns and pictures. And of course, social media, Instagram, my name, Hyungwon_Kang, Kang. Thank you for the opportunity to tell my story.